I expected this review to be easy, and boy was I wrong. Because I thought I would just tell you that the Amiron Wireless is nothing else but a closed-back version with Bluetooth of the Amiron Home, which it kinda is, and I really like the Amiron Home a lot. But going closed-back and going wireless, a few things happened in my opinion, not for the better, that Beyerdynamic actually should have caught in development if they would have paid a little bit more attention to detail. Or maybe it's just me, and I'm totally aware of the fact that this review actually will sound way more negative than it really is. But that's just because I'm gonna focus on what's wrong here compared to the Amiron Home, or that could have been improved. But before we get into that, let's check what's in the box for the $700 that you have to pay for. You get this quite nice carrying case. It's a little bit on the bulky side because the headphones themselves don't really allow for any rotation. And inside you can obviously store the cables, which could have been maybe a little bit more premium. I mean, the USB Type-C cable is fine, but most people will just use the ones that they have there for the phone. But the 3.5mm cable is a little bit, very minimalistic. I mean, it has a remote control and so on, but for 700, I would have wished for something more luxurious. Which is also a little bit the case for the headphones themselves, because if you compare the $700 headphones with the noticeably cheaper, for example, MMX 300 here, which is very similar or pretty much the same like a DT 770, there is not much of a difference, so it doesn't really feel better built, because it's not bad built, absolutely. Everything is executed well, it feels solid, for example, the headband, and I don't think it will break anytime soon, but a few things should have been done better, maybe in terms of development of the headband, because this is actually a replacement unit. My first unit actually had an issue that I want to get quickly into. As you can hear, the headband here has a lot of strong force and it's very tight and very well done. But what happened on my first unit was that there was no resistance at all, and I could just slide this without any resistance. Now here at least I have it on the replacement unit, but it's still not quite as stiff as it should have been on this side. So maybe there is a structural issue that they should maybe check, or I just got two units that aren't perfect, but that's that about. Obviously the rest feels very well done. The headband is not super soft. I mean, it's soft enough, but there is quite some kind of bouncy force. It looks quite nice, but it attracts quite a lot of like dust and so on. Here on this side we have the controls, touch controls. We have the on and off button that glows, but you can't press your whole finger because then you don't see the LED if it turns on. So maybe just press it half-wise, but it's okay. USB Type-C, also 3.5mm jack. So we are covered on this side. So we can't really rotate. But my main issue with the design here of this one is just, first of all, I'm not a big fan of round ear pads, just because the ear is not round. And what happens here actually, because they are so big, you have a lot of wiggle room to the front and back, which actually has an impact on the sound. And then there is the ear pad itself, which feels very nice, feels kind of like this wild leather. So it's very soft, but it's not really velour. But as you can see here, there's quite some resistance force between. So it's also quite jumpy. It feels soft, but especially the top rim here is a little bit harder. And now here's the thing. The MX 300, which have a similar system, are way softer, don't have this hard rim. And this is where my issue comes along with, because I know Beyerdynamic already told me this when I complained about the fact that the clamping force is too low on those. They said it's supposed to be that because it's supposed to be more comfortable since it's a home speaker. But that's not really the case. Just because you lower the clamping force doesn't mean the headphone gets more comfortable, because this is what actually happens. It kinda is just on your head, kinda like a lump, like schlup. It feels like not really properly done, because the headband you therefore feel, because the whole weight gets down to the ear cups and they just kind of dangle around your head. There is no real tight fit. And if they would have made the pressure actually a little bit stiffer, that would have been no issue, because if you want it more loose, you can just stretch them a little bit, which you do on so many other headphones. But if they are already super loose, you can't make them any stronger, so you can't really force those together. That's just not the thing, because the clamping force is low, because it's like that on purpose. And with those stiff ear cups, it just doesn't properly mold around your head. And I've noticed, especially since on the closed version, the seal is very important, that it's not quite there, because if I move them with my head and just slightly get off, or if they just don't sit properly, and I think the clamping force actually has an impact, because it's not enough to give you the best possible sound. But I get into that later. They should have maybe used some different kind of ear pads. I mean, they are replaceable, but finding some that work and don't really have a negative impact on the sound won't be quite as easy. But if I put these on, as you can see, that have a noticeably stronger clamping force, these sit way better, and therefore the comfort is just better. I mean, you also have the issue with the sliding from front, but that's not an issue here. These you can wear for so long time, and these are actually amongst the most comfortable and best fitting headphones that I've had. And also, for example, the DT1919 Pro Series, and they wanted to have this lower because they felt maybe those weren't comfortable enough. But I think after all, since the Pro version is meant to be for pro use and people mix around with the whole day, I don't think they will have an issue with that either, because this is very similar of a system than the 1990 Pro. These are very, very, very super comfortable and have a great fit. But these, I mean, they are not uncomfortable, but due to them just dangling around, they're not a secure fit. I mean, they won't fall down, but it's just not a good fit, which I would have actually been fine, because people might actually like this, and this is not something that I really want to judge, but if it wouldn't have had an impact on the sound. But before I get to that, I want to quickly get into the Bluetooth itself. I mean, they stayed 30 hours of Bluetooth and they hold for super, super long, so that should actually be a thing. It also comes, obviously, which is quite a big thing for them, with the Make It Yours app, which I have to say is a nice app if it works, but so many times it crashes mid in the test or when the test is done and it doesn't save the result and so on. And I also think the whole way how it works, because you have to push a button when you hear the tone and then release it once you don't hear it anymore. But if you mess that up, you have to redo it over and over again. So I would have wished for a little bit more manual control to adjust that sound to get it yours. But I mean, after all, improve the app stability and make it maybe a little bit more user-friendly, because it looks quite minimal, the app, but once it gets the job done, the improvement of the sound is there. It's not a huge difference, maybe just because my ears actually already hear everything these are supposed to hear, so there is not a big change. That was the same thing for me also on the Avento Wireless, but it has a nice impact. But what I also have to say is that if you turn on Make It Yours, so the optimization, you have 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100%. And at 100%, 60, 80, but at the point where I enable it, at higher volumes of 80% and higher, actually some distortion happens, which is, I guess, something that they should have noticed. I mean, maybe the amp isn't strong enough or anything like that, or maybe it happens because it doesn't happen with the optimization off. Maybe it just boosts some odd frequencies because it only happens on super low bass. If you have that in music, then it can distort. It's not a huge issue, but it's just for a $700 headphone not supposed to do that. I mean, obviously, if you push the optimization on, the volume also gets raised. So it's more like a sounding effect. So it kind of expands everything. So the bass and the highs a little bit, so to make the sound a little bit more sound, but it's really minuscule and it makes the sound obviously better. Just a little bit, but just a little bit that you might expect. Even though if you use them wired, there's no problem at all. They are actually quite easy to push, no problem here at all. And then depending on your headphone amp, it sounds good. But I'm mostly going to talk about the Bluetooth sound. So the controls are still what they are. Touch and everything is okay. But now let's get to my crux. The comfort and fit has an impact on the sound, because if you have them on like this, sound is not the same. Because actually on my first day I was super happy with the sound, and then I tried them again and I thought, wait, something sounds off, something sounds different. And then I remembered the first day when I used them for a couple of hours, I was actually in my hi-fi chair with my head against the back, and then it kind of pushed them just gently together, and then the bass is just so much richer and more full. But if you don't have that, and they are not quite doing that, because you would just need this, just this tiny little bit more pressure to make a better seal for the bass to be way more pronounced, way more tight, because like this they sound in some cases a little bit thin. I mean, the bass, let me tell you, and after all it is pretty much a closed up version of the Amiron Home, which I liked a lot for what it did, because it sounds actually quite neutral with a little bit of a warmer, nicer, a little bit more emphasized bass, and also obviously some pushed highs with the mids being a little bit laid back. And I don't want to really get too much into that, because for that just watch my review, I will link it down there below. But due to this kind of lack of the bass, this kind of thin feeling, I think a lot of the experience of the sound gets done or gets rid of, because if you just push them gently, the bass gets so much tighter. And I mean, it's a great bass, strong sub bass, great, precise, fast responsive bass with a lot of details. I mean, we know that from the 1990 Pro, we know that from the Amiron Home, but due to going closed, it's more noticeable, because the open back version of the Amiron Home, which also didn't sit so perfectly, didn't really have a benefit because it was open anyways. But here, if the seal isn't properly done, you lose out on that. Obviously, the mids aren't super pronounced. They're a little bit laid back, so I would actually say that the vocals are in between the instruments, or actually slightly behind in some tracks, but in most situations I really liked it. And the high is super clear, brilliant, and it actually sounds quite wide and open, so great soundstage, great imaging, and all that. Just watch the review, I don't want to get into that. Could have made pretty much the best audiophile Bluetooth headphone, but with the few little issues that I have with it, like the comfort, which is debatable. It might be, to your preference, be good, but I'm just gonna say it once again, Beyerdynamic, just lowering the clamping force without adjusting things compared to the Amiron Home, this doesn't work, because this schlurp is not nearly as comfortable as this. Also close back, way better pads, maybe not quite as a good material and so on, but that's the way it should have been. And I think if we would have had this comfort and fit, this would have been even way better, because the sound is on a really good level. And the Amiron Home, absolutely worth the $500, because what you get here in terms of details, if you don't want the super accuracy and the kind of neutral sound of the DT19 Pro, but more a lush experience, more of a just pleasurable, satisfying experience, you would get that here. So maybe you don't have this issue with the clamping force, maybe you find it more comfortable, or maybe you can kind of get it a little bit tighter, maybe switch out the pads, and this thing would have completely fixed the issue, because it's pretty much everything just happening due to that. I mean, also the distortion, maybe not that great, but most people don't listen that loud as I do, and shouldn't run into it. Obviously, you won't run into it wired, but why pay $700 and use it wired if you just can get the cheaper wired version? Yeah. Great sound potential and everything else. Could have been a little bit more arduous for the price, but going wireless, going closed back, not quite perfectly executed of what could have been an absolutely great headphone. And it is pretty much still, just in terms of sound quality itself, it is the best Bluetooth headphone that I've heard. Doesn't mean it is the best, because I hadn't heard many, because not really many make audiophile high-end Bluetooth headphones these days. Maybe for a good reason, I don't know, but that's that. Let me know in the comments what you think, and yeah, until next time, bye.